August 19, 1981. 40 miles north of the Libyan coast, somewhere over the Gulf of Sidra, Lieutenant Commander Hank Kleeman's radar intercept officer watched two contacts accelerate out of a formation of Libyan jets and turn nose on. The scope told the story before the radio did. Two Su-22 Fitters, closing fast, splitting apart, a textbook bracket maneuver designed to force the Americans into choosing which threat to honor. They had seconds. The lead fitter fired first. An AA-2 Atoll, a heat seeker, Soviet-built, a copy of the American Sidewinder from 15 years earlier, came off the rail and tracked toward Kleeman's F-14. It missed. Whether by countermeasures, geometry, or simple luck, the missile passed without guiding. The Libyan pilot had thrown the first punch over international waters and whiffed. Kleeman's wingman, Lieutenant Larry Musinski, rolled in on the trailing Su-22, one AIM-9 Lima Sidewinder. The fitter came apart. Kleeman took the leader. Same weapon, same result. 60 seconds from first hostile act to two burning aircraft falling toward the Mediterranean. The engagement, the first American air-to-air kill in nearly a decade, lasted about as long as it takes to read this paragraph aloud. The after-action summary from the carrier, USS Nimitz, described the intercept in language so dry it borders on parody. Both hostile aircraft were destroyed. No adjectives, no drama. The Navy way. Two Libyan pilots ejected into warm water. Two American crews turned back toward the Nimitz, and an airplane that half the Pentagon had tried to strangle in its crib had just announced itself to the world. That airplane, Grumman's F-14 Tomcat, had arrived in the fleet barely 7 years earlier, dragging behind it a reputation for killing its own crews. Engine failures, compressor stalls. The TF-30 engines that powered the early models flamed out if a pilot looked at them sideways during high angle of attack maneuvering. Between 1972 and 1980, the Tomcat's accident rate made headlines, gave ammunition to every critic in Congress, and nearly handed the Navy's fighter mission to a smaller, cheaper airframe. If this kind of history matters to you, the real records behind the aircraft and the crews who proved them, a like and a subscribe keep these stories visible. And if you served with a Tomcat squadron or knew someone who did, put their name in the comments. That matters more than any algorithm. The cost overruns alone should have buried the program. Original unit price estimates came in around $12 million per aircraft in 1969 dollars. By the time full-rate production settled in, the number had climbed past 20 million. The Government Accountability Office published reports using words like unacceptable and unsustainable. Congressional hearings featured admirals defending a jet that kept falling out of the sky. Grumman nearly went bankrupt building it. So how did a swing-wing, twin-engine two-seat interceptor, overweight, overpriced, underpowered in its original configuration, become the thing that Libyan and Soviet pilots did not want to see on the other side of a merge? How did it outlast every replacement the Pentagon proposed across 3 decades of service? The answer starts not over the Gulf of Sidra, but 6 years earlier, on the deck of the Enterprise, where a test detachment flew the first carrier-qualified F-14s and discovered something the specification sheets hadn't captured. The AWG-9 radar, Hughes built, enormous, drawing so much power it dimmed the cockpit lights on startup, could track 24 targets simultaneously and engage 6. No other fighter radar on Earth came close. The Soviets had nothing comparable until the late 1980s. We could see them before they could see us, one VF-124 pilot told Grumman's company historians. And we could reach out and touch them before they knew we were there. Range and awareness. In air combat over open water, where there are no mountains to hide behind and no ground clutter to mask an approach, those two qualities matter more than speed or turn rate, more than anything else a fighter brings to the fight. The Tomcat had both. And on that August morning over the Gulf of Sidra, the Libyans found out. What killed the F-111 Bravo? Weight. The Navy variant of Robert McNamara's Joint Service Miracle tipped the scales at 77,000 pounds fully loaded. No tailhook on Earth could stop it reliably. Carrier pilots who flew the evaluation flights came back shaking their heads. The airplane handled like a freight elevator in the pattern, and its approach speeds terrified LSOs who had to wave it aboard. Congress pulled the plug in 1968 after spending nearly $4 billion in today's money on a naval fighter that could not safely land on a ship. But the weapon system, that survived. The AWG-9 radar and the AIM-54 Phoenix missile represented a decade of Hughes engineering aimed at a single nightmare scenario: a massed Soviet bomber raid launching cruise missiles at a carrier battle group from beyond the escort's engagement envelope. The Phoenix could reach out past 100 miles. Nothing else in Western inventories came within half that range. Throwing away the airframe made sense. Throwing away the weapon would have been criminal. Grumman got the contract to build a new airplane around it. The British had tried something similar a few years earlier with the TSR-2, a revolutionary airframe saddled with political interference and spiraling costs that got axed before it could prove itself. Its role handed to an American aircraft, the F-111, which itself failed the Navy. But that's beside the point. The F-14 prototype flew in December of 1970. 9 days later, it crashed on its second flight. Hydraulic failure. Test pilot Bob Smith and project pilot Bill Miller ejected safely. Grumman had the second prototype airborne within weeks, which tells you something about how fast Bethpage could move when survival depended on it. The variable sweep wing worked beautifully. Swept forward at 20 degrees for slow-speed carrier approaches, the Tomcat floated down to the deck with the manners of a much lighter airplane. Swept back to 68 degrees at Mach 2, it cut through the transonic regime without the buffet and drag penalties that plagued fixed-wing contemporaries. The wing box, a massive titanium structure running through the fuselage, added weight but gave Grumman something invaluable: an airframe that could loiter on station for hours at low sweep, then sprint to an intercept at high sweep without compromising either mission. The engines could do neither well. Pratt & Whitney's TF-30 had been designed for the A-7 Corsair, a subsonic attack jet. Strapping two of them into a Mach 2 Plus interceptor produced thrust that fell roughly 4,000 pounds per engine, short of what Grumman's engineers wanted. At high angles of attack, the compressor sections ingested their own disturbed airflow and stalled. The result smelled like kerosene and burning titanium on the flight deck, when the crews got back at all. 2 engagements, 4 Libyan aircraft destroyed. 0 American losses. 8 years apart, same body of water, same result. The 1981 shootdown has already been told. Kleeman and Musinski, 60 seconds, 2 Su-22s burning. But the details underneath that clean summary reveal something the timeline alone cannot. Kleeman's RIO, Lieutenant Dave Venlet, had the Libyan formation on the AWG-9 at over 70 miles. 70. The Su-22 carried no radar worth mentioning. A simple ranging set, adequate for dropping bombs on Chad, but useless for finding a fighter over open ocean. The fitter pilots flew toward the American section functionally blind, relying on GCI controllers back in Tripoli, whose radar picture lagged reality by several seconds. The Tomcat crews tracked the Libyans through every turn, every altitude change, for nearly 8 minutes before the merge. The bracket developed in full view. They called it to the Nimitz, had time to discuss it. The Libyans had time to die. That gap, the difference between knowing and not knowing, mattered more than thrust-to-weight ratios or turn performance. Venlet could read the geometry of the fight before it became a fight. The Libyan pilots entered the merge with bravery and with nothing else. Fast forward. January 4th, 1989. Same water, different carrier, the John F. Kennedy, steaming through the central Mediterranean on a freedom of navigation exercise that everyone involved understood Gaddafi would challenge. 2 F-14 Alphas from VF-32 launched on combat air patrol. Commander Joseph Connolly and Lieutenant Commander Leo Enright in the lead, Lieutenant Herman Cook III, and Lieutenant Commander Stephen Collins on the wing. The contacts appeared at 72 miles. 2 MiG-23 floggers, Libyan Arab Air Force, accelerating out of Al Bumba airfield and heading north. The geometry started hostile and got worse. Every time Connolly turned to establish a neutral intercept profile, nose offset, Non-threatening, the MiGs corrected back toward him. 5 times the Americans turned away. 5 times the Libyans repointed. The TISEO, television camera set, a long-range optical sensor mounted under the Tomcat's nose, picked up the floggers at visual range and confirmed they carried AA-7 Apex missiles. That detail mattered. The Apex had a radar-guided variant with a 20-mile envelope. These weren't patrol aircraft bumbling into an intercept. They came armed for a fight. At approximately 12 miles, the floggers' radar signatures shifted. The after-action report from CVW-1 describes the moment with clinical brevity. Bogies demonstrated hostile intent, Connolly called Fox 1, an AIM-7. Sparrow came off the rail. The smell on the flight deck of the Kennedy that morning, cold salt air cut with jet exhaust and the particular acrid sweetness of a steam catapult at full stroke, carried across 200 miles of Mediterranean to where 2 flogger pilots discovered they had miscalculated for the last time. Connolly's first Sparrow missed, his second guided true. Cook's AIM-7 took the trailing MiG-23 head-on. Both floggers fell into the Gulf of Sidra within 40 seconds of each other. At least 1 Libyan pilot ejected. Libyan search and rescue recovered him. Sources conflict on the second crew. The aerial gun camera footage aired on American television that evening. Millions of viewers watched the Sparrow track the flogger, watched the flash, watched the smoke trail arc downward. What they could not see, what the footage could not convey, were the 8 minutes of maneuvering that preceded the shot, the 5 deliberate turns away, the patient accumulation of evidence that these MiGs intended to engage. The ROE demanded it. The crews honored it. They gave the Libyans every chance to turn around. Commander Connolly, asked about the engagement afterward, put it plainly. "We didn't go looking for a fight. We went looking for an intercept. They made it a fight." 2 intercepts separated by nearly a decade. Different crews, different Tomcat variants, different Libyan aircraft, different threat envelopes. The constant, American crews who saw first, decided first, and shot first after being shot at, and never missed twice. How many kills does a fighter score by never firing? After January 1989, Libyan jets stopped coming north. The pattern showed up in carrier air-wing intel briefs across the early 90s. Tomcat crews on CAP would paint contacts with the AWG-9, and the contacts would turn south, every time. The MiG-23s and MiG-25s that had once probed the edges of the freedom of navigation exercises pulled hard reversals the moment their radar warning receivers lit up with the AWG-9's distinctive pulse Doppler signature. Gaddafi reportedly spent over $2 billion upgrading his integrated air defense network through the late 80s and into the 90s. SA-5 batteries, early warning radar chains, hardened command bunkers. He built his fortress against the thing that had humiliated him twice from beyond visual range. The Tomcat never came low enough for any of it to matter. By 1995, the F-14 Delta, finally equipped with General Electric F-110 engines, producing 27,800 pounds of thrust each, the motors Grumman had wanted since 1969, could supercruise in clean configuration. The airframe that critics called a relic now outperformed most of its contemporaries in raw energy metrics. Maintenance man-hours per flight hour dropped from 52 on the TF-30-powered Alpha to under 40 on the Delta. The aircraft the Pentagon kept trying to retire kept getting better. They retired it anyway. September 22, 2006, the last operational Tomcat, an F-14 Delta from VF-213, the Black Lions, trapped aboard the Theodore Roosevelt in the Persian Gulf. 32 years of fleet service, 4 confirmed air-to-air kills over Libya, combat deployments over Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia. The TARP's reconnaissance pod made the Tomcat the Navy's primary tactical photo platform for a decade because nobody else carried the sensors or had the range. An odd footnote, the F-14 also held the Navy's speed record for an arrested landing aboard a carrier, reportedly touching down at over 170 knots during a test evolution in the mid-70s. That detail appears in Grumman's internal records, but connects to nothing else in the operational story. The Navy shredded the retired airframes, cut them into pieces at the Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Center in Tucson. The official reason? Iran still flew F-14s, 79 Tomcats sold to the Shah before the revolution, and the Defense Department wanted no spare parts reaching Tehran through back channels. So the last Tomcats died to deny their own technology to the only other nation that ever operated them. Iran's Tomcats, meanwhile, kept flying. Iranian engineers reverse-engineered parts, fabricated new components, reportedly adapted the Fakhur 90 missile as a domestic Phoenix replacement. The aircraft America built to defend carrier battle groups against Soviet bombers ended up defending Iranian airspace against Iraqi MiGs during the Iran-Iraq War, scoring at least 3 confirmed kills. The airframe outlived its country of origin's willingness to fly it. The Libyans spent billions defending against an attack profile the Tomcat never needed to use. The Americans shredded their own jets to keep them from an ally-turned-adversary who figured out how to keep them airborne anyway. Rear Admiral Paul Gilchrist, who commanded F-14 squadrons in the fleet's early days and buried friends who died in TF-30 failures, wrote it down simply in his memoir. "We loved that airplane more than it deserved, and it deserved more than we gave it."